So it's the frog in the pot, and they will always use some kind of context that said, I want what's best for you. So I don't want you to talk to your sister Linda X times a week because this is what happens afterwards. You're always doing this and you seem unhappy. They will try to create a story in your head that makes it sound like they've got your best interest at heart. Please be very aware that this is a common tactic. It works. Almost all of the women and men that I've spoken to or interviewed or been in support groups with who've been through an isolating and controlling, emotionally abusive, mentally abusive relationship, this is a huge component, and this is a thing that happens pretty much in every single one of them. It's a recipe for more abuse and more access. That person can access more control over you. When this happens, you get out and you're like, oh, I'm free, but you're not free because there's a cage that's been built in your mind for years and years if you've been in these relationships. Hello, Steph here. I have you in the car with me. I just wanted to share something that really hit me today. And this is again inspired by another book and an interview, actually. An interview between Ed Milet and James Clear. It's from over a year ago, actually. So popped up this morning at just the right time. And James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it yet, definitely go check it out. I've had the book for years. I always hear people recommending it. I had it on Audible many years ago. I haven't listened to it in a long time. But what I liked about this interview was this, one of his concepts. A lot of it's about, obviously, habits. But some of it is about how we can get into black and white thinking. And this is something that really clicked with me, related to some things that are happening in my life and related to motivation and things that I've seen with both of my kids. And I think that what can happen is when you are surrounded by people who are very black and white thinkers, you can get into this pass, fail, win, lose mindset without, even if you weren't that person to begin with. Like, I grew up in a family that was fairly supportive. I think I had a lot of hope in my life. I grew up with faith in my life. And I know that the people that you surround yourself with can definitely shift your concept of what's possible. And so the reason I'm sharing this is because someone who's survived toxic relationships where there was isolation involved, part of that is strategic on the part of the person who's doing the isolating, right? So they know that if you have people around you who are building you up, giving you support emotionally, saying positive things to you, giving you hope, fueling you with love, confidence, support, they're going to try their best to cut the cord, to isolate you, to tell you that this person, even if it's your mom or your dad or your sister, that they're not good for you, or they're always this way. You're better off without them because they'll come up with things that they think are negative, or they'll twist them into a negative in some way and kind of convince you. It's a form of gaslighting, but some of it might be accurate. Like, maybe there's something that they're saying that rings true. Oh, yeah, my brother really does always do that, or my mother really does call at weird times, or whatever it is. Like, maybe, I know in my case with one of the relationships I was in, it was like, your mom always calls at night, like right before we were going to bed, or like an inconvenient time for the other person, not for you necessarily, because maybe you love talking to your mom at night and your mom is supportive and your mom is one of your confidants and one of your biggest fans, and you feel really supported when you talk to your mom or whoever the other person is who might be doing those things. And if they say, oh, it's not really healthy for you to be talking to that person this many times a week or at this time of day, like, they'll find something to twist that positive person in your life into a not so positive And then you start to mull it over and you're like, oh, maybe they have a point. But the bottom line is when you're in those relationships, and if you're listening to this and you're still connected to people or a person or a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend who's like that, or even a parent who's trying to erode these positive relationships, please know that they're doing it with their own agenda. Because if they are able to isolate you and shift your habits of speaking to this person and having this positive influence in your life, over time, you cut off enough of those people, and maybe it's only a handful that you have at this point. Pretty soon you're standing alone and you're just stuck with a controlling person and their negativity and their lack of support. And maybe they dole out support systematically to manipulate you. They still give you support, but they're supporting you for things that fuel their agenda. So it's the frog in the pot. You might not feel like they're not a supportive person, and they will always use some kind of context that said, I want what's best for you. So I don't want you to talk to your sister Linda X times a week because this is what happens afterwards. You're always doing this and you seem unhappy. They will try to create a story in your head that makes it sound like they've got your best interest at heart. Please be very aware that this is a common tactic. It works. Almost all of the women and men that I've spoken to or interviewed or been in support groups with who've been through an isolating and controlling, emotionally abusive, mentally abusive relationship, this is a huge component. And this is a thing that happens pretty much in every single one of them. It's a recipe for more abuse and more access. That person can access more control over you when this happens. So if you sense that, whether you're in an old relationship or a brand new one, like that's a huge red flag. And that is something that you can shift by actively seeking out reconnecting with those people, because that person doesn't have control over your relationships. They don't. And if they're threatening you or doing other things that obviously you already know that you're not a good situation, and I'm not going to tell you what to do, but hopefully you can find some support. You can call a domestic violence hotline. You can get support groups near you. You can find ways to slowly, safely extract yourself from that situation. And mostly speaking to people who are in these relationships where there's not necessarily physical violence yet anyway, but it's mostly this mental abuse, manipulation, emotional abuse. They're slowly wearing you down and gaining control over you by chipping away at your ego, your confidence, your hope, all of those things. So listening to this interview with Ed Milet, he's an amazing interviewer. He's extremely successful. He's not a billionaire. He has hundreds of millions of dollars, I think, but he's a self-made man. And he went to a conference when he was a kid, and he came back home and his dad was like, hey, what did you learn? He was still, it sounded like he was in his maybe early 20s. And he said, Dad, I just learned that the people I surround myself with are going to dictate my future. They're going to impact how my life turns out. And I think that's something that we need to really think about. Maybe this is obvious to some people. I don't think that it's obvious to everybody. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in the material things like, oh, my husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, whatever, makes this much money, or their family's very wealthy and we're affluent. So I am surrounding myself with success and all these great things. You could say that, but if they're chipping away at your ego, they're keeping you small, they're preventing you from connecting with people who fill you up, make you feel good about yourself, make you feel hopeful about the future, help you have a spring in your step and get out of bed in the morning and feel happy about life, then are these people who are maybe offering you material wealth and look good on paper, are they really the people you want to be around? So there are people who may be more emotionally, spiritually connected to you and able to help you feel positive about life and frame your life and your personal potential as a human being, as a woman, as a mother, just as a person. They're helping you, they're reflecting back at you something about yourself that shows you you have potential, you have unlimited growth, and that you're not stuck in some fixed idea of who you are as a wife, as a girlfriend, a fiance, a sister, whatever, and all these roles. And so I really try to express how this conversation made me feel. And I think what I connected it to is just as an entrepreneur, I see these really young kids who are doing amazing in their businesses. And I remember being young, like in my 20s, teens and 20s, doing these entrepreneurial things, selling things. I had no fear. I would just jump in and try things and do it. And now, as somebody in my 50s, I have kids, I have trying to keep a roof over my head, trying to keep them mentally, physically, all of us healthy, spiritually happy, emotionally happy. It just feels like there's so much more riding on things. But I also have a story in my head that's telling me that I'm different than that person that I was when I was 20 something and fearless. And the question is that even really true? Yes, I've been through a lot of things, but ultimately, you can still approach life the same way. You could take action. Obviously, I have way more responsibility because I have children and people counting on me, but I can still approach life with the same enthusiasm, the same vigor, joy, the sense of curiosity, the wow, this is going to be exciting, instead of saying, oh, not going to work because of X, Y, Z. All the stories we tell ourselves, which are built up because we've been surrounded by people who have over time slowly programmed us into their way of thinking. Maybe they isolated us and we bought into this doctrine of the way that they frame the world, the way that they frame us. And so you can brainwash yourself out of it by surrounding yourself with other people who are more supportive, really over time, distancing yourself from the people who are maybe not. And I know that it's easier said than done, but I'm just sharing this because I feel like this is something that I see again and again with people who are survivors of domestic violence, emotional abuse, control, financial abuse, mental abuse, all of that stuff. You get out and you're like, oh, I'm free, but you're not free because there's a cage that's been built in your mind for years and years if you've been in these relationships. So that cage that's been built in your mind is something that you don't really see. You might feel, if you're very self-aware, you might be like, how come I used to be so outgoing? Or how come I'd pick up the phone and call friends or reach out and set up things? How come I'd go for it a lot more before? What has changed? Or maybe we're never quite like that. So the difference isn't as noticeable. But there's a part of you that feels like you just have lost your sense of hope. You've lost that sense of, it's okay for me to dream. It's okay for me to want more in my life, or to believe that I can even change my life. That's really the main thing. Is often we just get to a point where I am just stuck. Like I have no idea how to get out of this situation, how to change a situation. And it feels just so completely overwhelming and impossible. Just feels like maybe you feel like you're either walking on eggshells or you have a target on your back. You've got people around you maybe who are not only unsupportive, but literally trying to sabotage all the things that you do to pull yourself out of that stuck feeling or even out of darkness, out of depression. And so I just want to say that those things are very real. And when you think about all of them all at once, obviously you're going to feel incredibly overwhelmed. And if on top of that, you have legitimate mental health challenges in the form of anxiety due to lack of sleep, anxiety due to, again, being in a pressure cooker situation, walking on eggshells, having real threats, lack of support, maybe financial abuse, control, isolation. Maybe you're suffering from depression. Maybe you have some autoimmune issues which affect your energy level, your ability to think clearly, or just your overall sense of wellness, which is very common. Situations where you're living with people who are toxic and manipulating you all the time. And it's just an unhealthy environment overall. So I wanted to share this with you because and I'll put the interview with Ed Milet in the show notes. I love Ed Milet. Again, I'll just repeat that. But James Cleary, you could obviously get his book. It's called Atomic Habits. But before you get the book, I would say definitely go listen to the interview. So Ed Milet has both his YouTube channel and his podcast, I believe. I've actually only listened to Ed on his YouTube channel, and he has a ton of social media. But this interview is from about a year ago. And what I like about it is he uses these examples of how you can change your life in these just teeny tiny increments. And I think it's really different than what we are told to do, especially coming upon the new year where everybody's going to have New Year's resolutions and they're going to jump in and try to finally start eating right, finally start exercising or doing things they haven't done for a long time. And instead of chipping away at it a little bit at a time, as James Cleary recommends, they're going to go full tilt. Oh, I got to go to the gym every single day or every other day for an hour, or it doesn't count, which is complete baloney. In order to shift your habits, and this is what he says, but I know this for myself. I was a really chubby kid. I like to be outside, but at different times in my life, I was overweight. And I think for me, something clicked in my late teens, early 20s. And I was just like, all I have to do is, because I lived in the city, was like, I'm just going to take the stairs and walk to the train and walk to work from the train and carry my backpack. And I ended up seeing a chiropractor for part of that time. But the things that kept me in shape when I did not belong to a gym or anything like that were just basic choices. I didn't drive my car. I took the stairs instead of the elevator or escalator, depending where I was. And even on the escalator, I'd walk up the escalator because in Boston, I was in Central Square, which has, oh my gosh, I think it's two highly vertical, like incredibly tall escalators. And I would challenge myself to run up these escalators, which were monumental. But anyway, so those kinds of things, choosing to drink water, choosing to make your bed every day, choosing to write 5 positive things that happen that you're grateful for every night. Like these little tiny things. And maybe you start, let's say it was writing the 5 things. Maybe you don't start with 5, maybe you just start with 1. And one of his examples that I really like is he talks about this guy who wanted to lose weight. He has lost 100 pounds and kept it off. That guy would just get in his car and go to the gym. And I think he either just went to the gym and then came home, or he went to the gym and did one thing, like maybe 1 rep or whatever. But the point of it was, even if he didn't do anything, he got himself to the gym, which mentally shifted his perception of himself and who he was as a person. A person who gets their gym clothes on or even packs their gym clothes and shows up at the gym is a person who cares about their health. A person who wakes up early maybe and goes to the gym is also a person who cares about their health? Like all of these extra things help you shift out of whatever it is you're labeling yourself, whatever it is other people have labeled you. Like maybe somebody said, you're not good with money. I know in financial abuse, it's, oh no, all of the money's going to flow into my account. I'm going to manage our money, honey. So women and men do this, but women hand over the keys to their account, their paycheck, whatever. And the next thing they know, they're in this relationship where they don't even have access to the money that they earn. And I've known quite a few women like that where they earned really good income. And because that money was direct deposited into an account that was their husband's, and he was very controlling and abusive, they couldn't even access their own money. And they were fearful of changing that at work. Obviously, you can go to your employer and you could make changes. But when you're living in fear at home, you're not going to rock the boat. Maybe you're not going to do that. So it's very scary. So my point is that whether you're in one of these relationships or maybe you've been out for a while, maybe for a long while, these cages that we've built, these invisible cages in our mind, these, I don't know, it's a story about who we are and it's paralyzing and it tells us it's a form of brainwashing. It's no, you can't do investing. You don't know anything about money. Even though you're out, you're not with that person anymore. Let's say you have a little extra money and you want to start investing. But maybe you don't trust yourself because that person kept telling you you're terrible with money. Oh, honey, give the money to me. You always lose money or you spend too much or whatever. Or maybe they made you believe that you couldn't ever be financially independent on your own and you would always need a man in your life to help you get ahead. So there's a part of you that's scanning the men around you and waiting for somebody to come in and rescue you and take you to another level in your life. I see that a lot. So instead of telling yourself, no, I got this, I'm perfectly equipped, just like any other adult on this earth, to create the life that I want. And if somebody comes into my life who's a nice man or woman, I'm open to that, but I'm not going to wait for that. I have all the skills that I need, everything God gave me to become that. And then every day you do one small thing to vote for yourself and shift that perspective, that story in your head. And you prove to yourself that you are that person. And if it means tomorrow you haven't been making your bed for a couple of years because you're depressed, you don't feel like it matters, but maybe it does matter. Maybe you get up and maybe you fluff the sheets and pull the bedspread back and smooth it and you fluff the pillows and you say, okay, today's a new day. I don't have to be the same person that I was yesterday. I'm just going to shift one thing, 1% today. And I think that this book and this interview in particular is really powerful in the examples. He gives a really good example about the British cycling team and how they weren't very good. And then they hired that, like, they hadn't won for a very long time. I can't remember the details, but he discusses this example in the interview that I'll share on Ed Milet's show. And basically the coach just said, we're going to get there. It's not going to happen overnight, but he did all these small things that were incremental that got the team better, a little bit better. And he said, within 5 years, we will make it to the Tour de France. And so some of the things he did were just like they did some tests with the cycling wear that they wear both indoors and outdoors. And they did time tests and wind tests. And they discovered that the indoor attire was actually more aerodynamic. And so they adopted that as their permanent thing to wear instead of the outdoor wear. And they also didn't want the people on the team to get sick. So they decided, what can we do? They hired a surgeon to help them learn how to wash their hands properly so they wouldn't get sick or spread illness. And then they took the trailer or where they put the bikes, and instead of having it be painted a darker color, they made it white so that the people on the team could see that if there was dirt or blood or who knows what in there, they could clean it and they could make sure that they weren't being contaminated by something they were putting in that van. Again, he tells it differently probably than what I'm saying, but I'm like, wow, think about that. These little tiny things that they did. Anyway, so they thought it was going to be maybe 5 years, and it took 3 years, and they made it to the Tour de France. I don't remember their exact details, but I guess they won I don't know if they won their place, but 3 years in a row. But they just completely turned things around in 3 years. So imagine what you can do with your life if you just pick different aspects, one thing at a time, and just say, I don't have to settle. I don't have to be this person that everybody else has told me that I am, or that this relationship has told me that I am. I can change things. And just speak that to yourself. Just say to yourself, no, I can do this. And when I have things that are difficult, that's the thing I say over and over again. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. In my head, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And sometimes I get really hyped up about it because I'm like, I know I got this. And with scary things, I don't always say that. With scary things that are very scary, it takes more for me to muster that. But I know that if I take action towards that thing, and I'm sharing all this with you because I'm coming out of a really difficult year and a very confusing year medically, not being able to. I said to my therapist the other day, I finally have a therapist and he's great. This brain injury that I have, it's not a traumatic, like a big brain injury, but it's a brain injury. It affected my emotions. It affected my ability to think. It affected my ability to do my work, to see, to be balanced, like literally my balance. So it affected me in all these different ways, and I didn't really understand it at first. And it was really debilitating, and I was very confused and depressed. And even when I found out what it was, the therapies, 3 therapists, occupational type therapy, for me, made me so exhausted, because that's what happens when you have a brain injury or cognitive, something that affects your cognition. It can be very draining. And so I'm coming out of a lot this year, and I'm pulling myself out. So this episode really resonated with me because I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm not settling. I've been advocating for my kids and my friends who are like, you are so strong. You are so resilient. I don't know how you're doing it. I'm not on any depression medication, nor have I been. And I think if you need it, you should be on it. But I've had people say, like, how are you even getting through this? It's everything all at once, and literally life and death. And when you're in a situation like that, you have adrenaline that kicks in the short term. But then when it's not a week, it's not a month, it's not 2 months, it's 3 months, it's longer, you're like, okay, what now? And so I'm at that place where I'm like, this is an ongoing thing. I need to decide that come hell or high water, I'm going to get myself through this. I'm going to get my kids through this. And I'm doing all the things that I can. I am doing affirmations. I'm trying to meditate when I can. I mostly walk and meditate. That's how I do it. I put positive things in my mind. I sleep sometimes with sleep tracks that program my mind. I read books. I try to surround myself with positive people. I step out of any scenarios which I think are going to pull me down, or people are going to attack me, or want to know too much about what's gone on, because I am a pretty private person. And it's like, a lot that's happened isn't just my story. It's part of my kids, and it's not my place to share. My own cognition, my own mental state, this brain injury, it's post-concussion syndrome. I'll probably have somebody on to share what it is, because I do also know that a lot of people who are in domestic violence scenarios suffer from traumatic brain injuries. It's pretty common, and you could have an effect similar to what I'm going through, being slammed against a wall, obviously being punched in the face, punched in the head, having something slammed into you, or you slammed into something else, or falling really hard, or being in a car accident, or something like that. Mine did not happen from that, just to be clear. Mine was a car hit me on my bike, so bike accident actually. And a fall in a shower, a cement shower where I hit my head. So those two things. But the impact on your self-esteem, on your ability to think clearly, your ability to focus. I said to my therapist, because he's like, what are the things you want to work on? And he knows some of the other things that I've alluded to here about my life situation. But I said, I want to work on my business and the story in my head that this post-concussion syndrome is getting in the way or will prevent me from having a successful business. Because truthfully, there's always a way to work around things, and there's a way to work smarter instead of harder. And the thing is, I haven't known this till now, but I know now that I said to him, I feel like it's almost like having your superpowers stripped. And I didn't know I had superpowers. I really didn't. I have worked in technology for pretty much most of my successful career anyway. And I've done coding and all kinds of different apps and software. And I've done web accessibility, user interface design, user content writing. You name the app, I've probably used it or touched it. I've done a ton of writing. I've done a ton of creating, video editing, audio editing, writing, editing for writing, like just creating tons of graphics and things and really juggling so many different things. Not intentionally, but I was able to stop something, jump in, start it again, do this, do that. I was able to get a lot done. I also, at some points, have had other people working with me. As I've mentioned before, hiring support just has been an epic fail. And so it has not been helpful for me. But anyway, I literally sat at a computer screen in, I think, December or January and started crying because I could not cognitively understand this course that I paid for, which was like a mastermind login. It was so discombobulated and linear. You have to do this before you do that. I wasn't able to jump in and do what I wanted. And I got so angry and I cried. And then when I talked later, when I found out I had this issue, I talked to one of the OT people who was the cognitive person. She's, of course, like your brain, if you have no short-term memory and you can't piece together strings of numbers and things like that, you're forgetting words. These are all the things that were happening to me. To make sense of a screen that has so much information packed on it and to try to create a mental map in your mind of how to make it through was so completely overwhelming to me. That's why I cried. Anyway, I'm like maybe you. I'm trying to turn things around. I'm doing my best to not believe that doing my best to, I'm going to turn that around. I'm doing my best to believe, like I said, that I have everything that I need to turn this around, to make the things that I want to happen in my life happen and to create them. And if it takes me a little bit longer, I'm okay with that. I finally just decided the whole point of our life is when we set an intention. I intend to make my business work. I intend to launch a course for women who are entrepreneurs, mom entrepreneurs, who want to get onto podcasts as guests and amplify their authority quickly, become known, and get their message out and get warm leads, strengthen their SEO, and stop having to create content all the time and allow themselves to reap the benefits of being a guest and allowing these podcasters to create content that they are in and they can borrow from for their own social media, and allowing these podcasters to promote them and link back to their business websites. So that strengthens their SEO. So when you Google their name, they come up. This is what I'm working on right now. And I know how to do it. I recorded all of the modules and I had all this sickness and all these things, craziness happen in my family. And I'm like, you know what? That's going to happen. That's where I'm at. I can still make this work. It might take me longer, but I'm going to still make it work. And I am searching for tools that are helping me become more organized, helping me with shortening the tasks that I have at hand. I'm sure at some point I will hire a VA who's awesome, or multiple of them, to help me with this. But for now, I'm just like, I can do this. And even if I'm on the slow train, I am doing this. And I think that's why I wanted to share this with you, is my life is far from a cakewalk. It is very challenging right now. And I'm not throwing in the towel. I'm just not. And I've been there, though. I've been there. I've been suicidal. I've been extremely depressed. I've had zero support from family, from therapists, or anyone like that. I've struggled to even get a therapist, really, for me or my children. Like, there have been times when it's been just so ridiculous how many phone calls I've had to make and had nobody there to help me. And I literally just fallen to my knees and prayed. And thank God I've got good friends who will say something nice for me and pray for me, or just to help me stay afloat. But it's gotten, there have been times when it's been very scary. So I am sharing this because I want to, hopefully this comes across as a pep talk. Like, I'm on the journey with you if you're in the same place. So let's do this. And if there's something here that resonates with you, please shoot me an email. Right now, the best place to reach me is Steph, STEPH, Steph at stephanieroberts.com. And Stephanie does not have an E after the I. Stephanie Roberts. I would love to hear from you. You could also go to the website, theaudaciouslife.com. There's a way to message me there. Tell me what your struggle is. Tell me what's going on with you. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, we'll just do our best, 1% at a time. What's your 1% thing that you want to work on? Mine is organization, visibility, organization, like keeping promises, both to other people and to myself. I'm pretty good at keeping promises to other people and to my kids. Sometimes I don't keep promises to myself, specifically related to my business. So I am no longer doing that. So those are my main things for now. I have a very long list, but it's like you gotta focus on what will move things ahead first. And deep down, what's that one thing that's gonna be the thing that starts the wheel turning in the right direction for you and gets you out of this feeling of stuckness? So I hope that you guys go check out Ed Milet's interview with James Clear. If you've read or seen the interview, please do let me know. I'm trying to get back into social media. I have been invisible. If you follow me on Instagram, feel free to direct message me there. It's Audacious Life. It's also Audacious Mamas. Either of those accounts are mine. I'm also on Twitter as Audacious Life, and I think I had to change my other name. It's SLEIGH Roberts. Slay Roberts. Stephanie Lee Roberts is what that's short for. But yeah, find me. I'd love to hear from you. All right, lots and lots of love to you guys, and I will see you on the next episode.